A 43-year-old man from New South Wales has become the 9th First Nations person to die in custody this year. Number man Frank Coleman was found unresponsive in his cell at Sydney's Long Bay Jail last Thursday. His family say he was in good health leading up to his death.
We want to remember Dad for who he was, a proud Ngemba man, staunch and proud in his Aboriginal culture. He was outgoing and friendly. He made everyone smile and laugh. And Dad was a loving man, and he was deeply loved in return. So we will miss him dearly.
As of now, we still don't have an answer as to why he died, even after an autopsy has been performed. So even in the interim report, we haven't been given a cause of death. He was found at 5:45 a.m. in the morning. We weren't informed until later that afternoon, and we weren't informed by police or corrective services. We heard it through word of mouth.
Mr Coleman is one of at least 478 Indigenous people to die in custody since the Royal Commission 30 years ago. Stan, why haven't we fixed this yet?
Last time I was on this program, what did we talk about?
Yep, this.
What did we talk about? We've talked about this constantly. Can I first of all say my sympathies as well to the family, to the Coleman family, who are having to go through this, as so many other Aboriginal families have done. You've mentioned that 478 since the Royal Commission. We've had Royal Commissions. You know, we know what the recommendations were. Since then, we've had a 100% increase in Indigenous incarceration rate. You know, a country reveals itself by what it cares about. Now, we have managed as a nation to get through the worst of COVID, moving heaven and earth, finding money for JobKeeper and JobSeeker, dealing with the crisis, throwing everything at it. Before COVID, Indigenous people were dying 10 years younger and being locked up in obscene numbers compared to the rest of the population. When COVID's over, Indigenous people will still be dying 10 years younger than the rest of the population of diseases that are long gone from the rest of the population. Next year, we won't be talking about COVID, thankfully, this time next year, hopefully, but we'll have another Closing the Gap report, and it will tell us what it has told us for year after year after year. What do we care about? If we can move heaven and earth to deal with a pandemic and a crisis that threatened everyone in the country, and we have 3% of the population, and time again, despite Royal Commissions, recommendations, the tireless work of Aboriginal people who are lifting everything they can to try to deal with these issues, the Uluru Statement from the Heart thrown into the trash can, like the other recommendations that Aboriginal people have brought forward to try to improve the governance of Indigenous communities and better policy outcomes. If that's what we have, then we're going to repeat the same problems, and it shows us what we fundamentally care about. And I hate to say it, but when you see this time and time again, you have to ask Australia, are you comfortable with this situation? Because it doesn't change.
It's not, we so often talk about political will, but you're saying it's much broader than that. It's a broader societal, every single one.
In 230 years, Australia, by any measurement in the world, has built a remarkable country. And COVID has revealed just how efficient and successful we can be, even in the face of a global pandemic. The global financial crisis, Australia avoided the worst of it. So we can have all of these things that make a remarkable country. And who are the people who are the most impoverished and imprisoned? The people whose land was stolen to build this country. We have to ask ourselves, what is our collective responsibility? Where is not just the political will, but all of us throwing everything at this to say 3% of the population cannot continue to suffer in this way in a country that is able to deal with crises that have crippled other nations. You know, if you're going to be a great nation, that's fine, but you're also held to great account. And when we have stories like this, and we've had Royal Commissions, and we've had recommendations, and you and I continue having these same conversations, it drives people insane. I don't know where so many of the Aboriginal champions, Indigenous leaders and champions of this country, find the will and determination to keep going, but they do. And they do because there are real lives at stake, as we've seen here.
Amy.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that Stan has said. And ultimately, if those in power wanted this to stop, it would stop. Because we have had studies and Royal Commissions and reports. And also, as Stan said, how many times have I talked about this on this panel? And what audience might not realise is we're not booked in because there's been a death in custody. We're often in advance.
Right.
Right? And I'm never on more than once a month. And yet this would be the third time me being on the panel has coincided with an Indigenous death in custody, because that is the rate at which our people are dying, either in police presence or in custody. And it's not our fault. It's not our doing. We are over-policed, we are over-incarcerated, and we are seeing this time and time again. And these systems are intentionally violent. We know what needs to change, and those in power just need to step in and start enacting the changes that all of the reports and all of the studies and the Royal Commission itself call for.
Because I know that you have, you've said before about the need to ask the structural questions and look at the culture of the police. And you cited a study in WA to do with speed fines. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, right. I mean, that's one very simple example. So whenever this comes up on television, inevitably I'm finding questions online where people are saying, well, if they didn't break the law, they wouldn't be incarcerated. Firstly, capital punishment is not supposed to exist in this country. So for whatever reason someone has been locked up, they are not supposed to die in custody. Secondly, it is absolutely false that we are breaking the law at a higher rate than non-Indigenous people. The problem is that we are over-policed. So in WA, for example, we know that where the speed camera is just a standard speed camera that's built in, it's just a robot, that Indigenous people are fined for speeding at a proportional rate compared to non-Indigenous people. So if you're 3% of the population, you're only copping 3% of the fines. However, when it is a person, a police officer holding the speed gun, the rate of fines go up. And this is because it comes down to things like police discretion. But we have examples for every state and territory where you will find that we have these huge issues with policing. It was only yesterday that the Queensland Police Commissioner stood up and said they're cracking down on police engagement with social media because the police are expressing their racism, homophobia and sexism on platforms like Facebook. Your expressions and your behaviour online is just one iteration of those beliefs. If you're carrying on like that on social media, you're carrying on like that in your duties. And this is the issue we've got. We have racist systems. Policing is inevitably racist. It's that we see it in report after report. That's not even a discussion. We know that. It's violent. It is problematic. And when it comes to being locked up and being incarcerated, it is damaging. It is not justice. It is harmful. It is hate-filled. Think about how much we've all learnt through being restricted and in lockdowns in our homes, how maladjusted we feel when engaging in social settings. Being incarcerated in prison is far worse than that. And in WA, you can get locked up for not paying fines. We lock up 10-year-olds in this country. We lock up people for being poor. You can't pay your fines. That's a poverty issue.
Nancy, I know you did a lot of work on Indigenous health in Canada, and that in Canada, likewise, there is a disproportionate rate of incarceration for Indigenous people. This is a public health issue, is it not?
Absolutely, it's a public health issue, and when you look at Canada, we have a long legacy of colonization and, in fact, genocide. There really was attempted genocide of the Indigenous peoples of Canada. Our rate of incarceration, about a third of the federal prisoners are Indigenous, despite the population being about 5%. So that's incredible. And similar to Australia, there have been a number of commissions, and yet the rate of incarceration continues to climb. Once within the system, Indigenous people are more likely to be punished harshly. They're more likely to get prison sentences for the same crime. They're more likely to be put in solitary confinement, and they're less likely to get parole. And the system doesn't work for them. They're more likely to have recidivism. The system doesn't help them. Many of the people in prison in Canada have been part of the residential school program, which was essentially trying to de-indigenize our Indigenous people. It's a national shame that Canada is only starting to really reckon with. It's a deep problem that's part of Canada, and we just need to do something differently. Just trying to do the same thing over again continually is not solving the problem. So really there needs to be a wholesale change to how we approach these issues in Canada and Australia.